Hello everyone, this is Cameron here with a full body mobility routine. I like to call it the system check because it goes through most of the ways your body is designed to move. It'll help with functional strength and stability throughout your daily life or in preparation for exercise. You might find this routine will be especially useful after prolonged sitting or sleep after your body hasn't been moving for a long time. So you want to take time with these movements. Make sure you're doing them properly. Never try to throw your weight around. You always want to control it and control the movement or exercise that you're doing. There's no point in going so extreme to the point of injury. You want to make sure you understand the exercise first, and then you can start pushing your limits. So these are all dynamic movements, so you should pulse in and out of the stretch, only really holding it at that bottom position for 5 to 10 seconds at a time. And for all these exercises or movements, there are no recommended reps or sets. You can take as much or as little time as you need with each of them. And when going through the session, you might find that there are certain movements that are more challenging for you. These are the ones that you should focus on. Maybe pause the video, take a little more time, because your body needs to be exposed to it a little more often. This is a weak point. So to make sure that you're not going to get injured in the future, you want to get into this or tackle this weakness in a safe and controlled way to make sure that your body readapts to move that way with less likelihood of getting injured. And once you're finished, don't go right back to sitting. These results will be helped by 5 to 10 minutes of light physical activity, and it doesn't have to be just walking around the block or pacing. You can think about the other ways you can get this activity in, just standing up and moving around. So maybe cooking, cleaning, take a shower, brush your teeth, play with your pet, etc. There's lots of options. Alright, with that being said, let's get into it. The first movement that we're going to do is protraction and retraction of the scapula, or the shoulder blade. So protraction is moving it forward, and retraction is moving it back. You'll see there's forward, protraction, retraction right there. When you're protracting, you want to push your shoulders forward and squeeze, and retracting is bringing them back, squeezing them along the spine. And once you get comfortable, you can start incorporating internal and external rotation. Internal rotation during protraction, and then external rotation during retraction. Our next movement here is shoulder abduction, and abduction basically just means to take away. So we're taking away our arms from our sides, and to start this motion you want to retract your shoulder blades and externally rotate your shoulders so that your palms or thumbs are facing up. Try not to let your shoulders raise to your ear with this movement. You want to keep them down as best you can. Go slow and feel your shoulder blades rotate up with your arm and along your spine. You'll kind of feel this as a massage, or almost an adjustment in your back. Our next movement here is the overhead stretch for your lats. You're going to be placing both hands behind your head, and you want to try to get your elbows right up to the sky and kind of hugging your head, and you'll feel your lats a lot more. That's an external rotation right there. And then once you get that, you're going to be kind of coming in and out of the stretch by leaning forward and back. So you can see me just kind of playing around with it, finding a spot that I feel it most, and then holding there for 5 to 10 seconds. If you want to get really fancy with this, you can protract as you're there. So you'll see here, there I move. It's a very subtle movement, moving the shoulder blades forward, and that'll increase the stretch as well. Now we're going to get into some chest flies. So it's a chest stretch, and you're just fully opening up that chest by retracting and kind of externally rotating. Your thumbs are pointed up or behind you throughout this entire movement, and just feel the stretch. You'll feel it in your biceps as well. You want to go slow, and you can pause at the back too if you'd like. Here, I'll show you the retraction here. It's just a big squeeze. There, so go in any direction you like, whatever's most comfortable for you. Now back into some lat flexibility. We're going to be doing side bends. So lifting your arm up to have your hand placed behind your head and just bending to one side. So now the key here is to make sure that your hips don't bend as well. This is a lower back stretch. So you're anchoring your hips. They don't rotate and one doesn't come up higher than the other. You want to anchor that because that's where your lower back muscle attaches to. So that's your anchor point, and you're moving from your upper body. And you'll see here in a second, when you get comfortable with this movement, you can start doing it with a straighter arm. There we go. A little too tall for the ceiling, and bending all the way over. So you want to make sure you get that full extension first. I have to just get it with a bent elbow, unfortunately, but reach all the way and out to the side, and you'll feel it lots in your lats. Now here's a movement that is a little unorthodox. I'm not sure if it's a yoga move. I just kind of made it up, but I call it praising the sun. So you start upright and then basically bend down to touch your toes and come on back up. So it's a full shoulder abduction to the top, and hinge your hips. You're not bending your spine yet. Don't bend your spine yet. And now when you get to that bottom position, you can bend your spine. That's at the bottom deadlift position. So if you know your deadlifts, you'll be able to recognize when your lower back is going to give out, and you want to bend your hips to that point. You'll see I'll turn to the side, and here we go again. Right, hinge the hips back, hips come back, spine isn't bent yet, and now I am. So you'll feel it. It's the whole posterior chain, the whole back line is being stretched here, and you can hang down there for a second, mostly the hamstrings. And when we go down again, I'll show you on the way up, you want to be squeezing your glutes the whole time. So when you come up, squeeze your glutes, or just hang there for a second. Now squeeze your glutes and come up. There it is, straight back, and then you bring your hips forward. And I decided to put the neck stretches in right now as opposed to earlier, just to make sure that we're getting our whole body moved, the kind of larger, more stable parts of our body before getting into the neck, which is a little more vulnerable. So you want to make sure that you're stretching the muscle instead of putting pressure on the joints, the cervical vertebrae in your neck. You want to kind of stretch up and lean to the side ever so carefully. And when you're over there getting your stretch, you can move your shoulder blade, protract and retract your shoulder blade as you see fit, and you'll feel the stretch kind of moving in different spots. And you can, there you see I just pinned one down and I'm holding that stretch. And you'll stay there for as long as you need, and shake it out and go to the other side. And again, like I said at the beginning, you do this as many times as you feel necessary until you're done with the stretch, until you feel finished with it. Now here you're going to see me protract and then go into a forward neck stretch. So this is going to grab some of your traps that you wouldn't otherwise stretch with a neck stretch. So the protraction kind of brings your shoulder blades down and stretches your traps a little bit. So there's protract and bend forward. Still keeping an upright back. It's just your shoulder blades that are coming forward, so you can get a different kind of stretch. So now we're going to get on our knees for something called the Cat-Camel, and we'll be on our knees for the next few exercises. So if you do have knee problems or start to feel discomfort, then put a pad or a pillow or something under your knees to prevent that. And if it gets too much, just stop the movement and get off your knees and do something else. So for this, here you'll see it's a lot of spine and hip movement. So you're retracting there and pulling your hips back, and then protracting and moving them forward. There, and your neck gets involved too. Right, it's just full spinal mobility, pushing up and in with your hips and down and out. Next are over-under reaches, and you'll see why I call them that in a second, but for now we're going to just start by placing your hand on your ear and the elbow flared out to the side, and you're going to reach your elbow all the way in to touch your hand and then back up to the ceiling. Okay, so this is full rotational mobility in your spine. It's mostly your thoracic spine, your mid-back, and to make sure that your cervical, your neck, is in line with that, you want to follow your elbow with your head as you rotate up. Okay, so here's where we get into the next movement. So we're going to reach all the way under and then all the way up. So it's the same kind of movement, but we're getting a little more intense here. So there's over and there's under. Right, reaching as far as you can while remaining balanced on your two knees and one hand. But it's the same concept. So you're going under, following it with your eyes, and all the way up. Following that hand with your head, looking at it the whole time. Next, we have a combination exercise. Child's pose into Cobra. It's for your hips and lower back. The child's pose, you lean back into your heels and reach as far forward as you can with your hands. So your hands are outstretched as much as they can and pushing into the ground to activate your lats. And as you come forward into the Cobra, you're still activating your lats by pushing your hands into the ground. It doesn't have to be too hard. You can push gently, but you want to make sure they're still active as you come forward, and then squeeze your glutes right there into the Cobra. That'll take some tension off your lower back and stretch your hip flexors, and that's the front side of your hips. Next, we're going to go into a modified side lunge, which will stretch your hip adductors and hamstrings once we modify it once more. So in a kneeling position, you stretch or reach your leg straight out and rock your hips back and forth. You want to make sure you're keeping a glute squeeze here, as it'll help you control this stretch. And it can be intense, so take this one slow and focus on keeping that foot planted and your hip down to make sure it doesn't rotate up, because you'll lose the stretch that way. Just stay in the stretch and rock it back and forth. If you find a spot that really feels a stretch, then pause there for a little bit, but otherwise just keep it moving and feel the stretch. And now if you're comfortable with just the adductor stretch, you can tilt your foot up, point it to the sky or ceiling, and you'll feel it more in your hamstrings. It's the same motion, but now your foot is pointed up and it's going to target a different spot on your leg. It kind of goes closer to the back side instead of the side. And now we'll transition into an upright lunge for a hip flexor stretch. Your hip flexors do exactly that. They flex your hips, and they're located right where my right hand is. They connect your hip to your thigh bone, otherwise known as your femur. And to target these, we're going to get into something called posterior pelvic tilt. Now notice more in the side view, I tilt my pelvis or hip bone, and you'll see it here, tilting it like that. The lower part of it comes forward and the upper part comes backwards, and that'll activate your hip flexors. You may even get a stretch with just that movement there, but if you want to get a little bit more, lean deeper into the lunge and come upright with your chest. Now we're going to get into a movement that will increase your core stability and hip mobility. So starting off, we're just lying down. I'm squeezing my glute here to drive my knee into the ground, and you'll feel stretch in the front of your hip there. And my arms are outstretched, anchoring my upper body to the floor. And as I rotate, my shoulders should not move much. Just my hip and trunk are rotating over, keeping my core stable so that my knee and foot are hovering above the ground. They're not touching. Right, and bring it back over, hang out there for as long as you need, and back over. So as I come back and I'm just lying here, I'm squeezing my glute. Make sure to squeeze your glute when you're in this position. It's not inactive. Take deep breaths and relax. Just let yourself fall into that movement. And I'll take a lot of time here too. Deep breath, exhale, and squeeze glute. And then the same thing. So now we're going to make it a little bit tougher and outstretch the leg as we reach over. That'll increase your demand for core stability and make it a little bit tougher for your lower back and obliques and all that musculature to cope. So only come into this if you're comfortable with the other movement, and perform it on both sides just like usual. Moving into the straight leg raise. It's for posterior chain mobility, and you'll feel a stretch in anywhere that is tight in your posterior chain. So for me, it's the hamstrings. I feel it a lot in the hamstrings when I do this exercise. And you're just flexing at the hip, trying to keep your knee as straight as possible, coming up and holding for a couple seconds before bringing it back down. And again, do it as many times as you feel necessary, and then move on to the next one. Now we're going to work on ankle mobility and hamstring mobility. So here I'm just playing around with my ankles, just getting them ready to move side to side, up and down, any way you feel that they need to be moved. And then I'm going to start lifting up my legs, supporting my weight with my hands. So my hips are flexed, and I'm just lifting up my legs to stretch my hamstring. We're going to finish off with a wall calf stretch, so just stretching the back of your shin. And we're going to do this by getting into a lunge position and driving your heel into the floor with a straight leg. So you're pushing off of the wall and driving that heel into the floor. Then you lift up every once in a while, contracting that same muscle that you're stretching. So pushing up through the balls of your feet, contracting the calf, and then going back into a deeper stretch. Congratulations, you have completed the system check. Hopefully you're a little more mobile and ready to tackle the day or tackle that workout. So this is my first time making a video like this. It took me a lot longer than I'd like to admit. So it'd be cool if I could have your feedback if I've kept you till this point. And I'm looking to keep on making videos, so look out for those. I thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.